Insurance professionals work hard every day to keep people safe, but as technology transforms the industry, how can insurers protect not only their clients, but also shield themselves from ever-changing cyber risks? My name's Elizabeth Blossfield, and I'm the host of the Insuring Cyber podcast, a monthly look into how the world of cyber and the business of insurance are connected. This episode is brought to you by RPS. RPS helps brokers drive client success in the E&S space. See how RPS delivers tailored, data-driven insurance, benefits, and underwriting solutions at rpsins.com. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Insuring Cyber podcast. Last month, we talked about AI actuaries, and this month, we're talking about AI agents and the continuing evolution of agentic AI in insurance. To break this all down for us is John Kain, Director of Financial Services Market Development at AWS. He spoke with me about how agentic AI is taking on more responsibility in insurance, even with the onboarding of teams of AI agents to check each other's work just like a human team would. He talks about creating balance, efficiency, and how this is all making human employees' jobs better and faster. Check it out. Hi, John. It's nice to meet you. How are you doing today?
Good, thanks. Pleasure to meet you too, Elizabeth.
Yeah, thanks for taking the time to join the podcast. I'm really looking forward to our conversation. I know that agentic AI is kind of this buzzword in insurance right now, and I'm excited to get into it. Before we get to some of the questions, could you just start off with a brief overview of some of your background and the work that you do?
Sure. So I lead a team here at AWS, which is part of the investment we've made into the financial services industry. I lead a team of experts that come from industry that really work with our customers from the insurance and other financial services segment context to help them achieve their business goals by leveraging AWS technology in a way that'll kind of help transform their business. And certainly there's probably no other topic that's been as top of mind as agentic AI and the way it can kind of transform businesses. And so as you can imagine, we've spent quite a bit of time with our customers, really helping them take advantage of that technology to help transform their business.
Yeah, well, it sounds like exciting work that you're doing. I'm glad that you're here today because I know you have a lot of expertise in this topic, and I've been hearing it everywhere at conferences and in meetings. So I'm excited to dive into it. I know that insurers have been using AI technology for years to sort of help with automation and efficiency, but what's driving the shift now toward agentic AI in particular?
Yeah, I think the move to agentic AI kind of captures two themes, one that's more business oriented, one that's more technical oriented. From the business angle, it's really the move from generative AI technologies to be able to allow you to distill information more effectively and make better insights into business to ones that can actually act on your behalf. Essentially, the difference between being able to kind of chat with an insurance policy to understand coverage to a process that actually allows you to understand your customer, understand the regulations that they work within, understand the risks that they're trying to insure, what's the best policies, and then actually go execute that. And so it's the desire to turn some of these generative AI technologies into something that is more independent and kind of helps take more action on behalf of the business. The second part is really sort of the technology about how we got there. As insurers have been using generative AI technology over the last 3 or 4 years, what they've understood is to build applications that are truly successful, instead of asking general artificial intelligence to kind of solve big problems, actually, it's much more effective to break those problems into smaller tasks and then use the ability of generative AI to work with unstructured information and more interactive human components to actually break those down into smaller components and then chain them together into a workflow. And so in that process, I mentioned about sort of figuring out what the right policy to recommend and then sort of execute. Instead of just asking one large language model, do that for me beginning to end, the results there haven't been so great. But when you actually break that process down into smaller steps, ground it with very specific information to those subtopics of how do I validate a customer is actually insured by me? How do I understand sort of what the claim they're trying to process is? How do I make sure the required documentations? By breaking those in individual steps, and then having those agents essentially work with each other to kind of get to the end in the process yields a much more effective results and has allowed insurers to automate and get real benefits from a much broader part of the process than they have before. Along with that comes sort of the technology standards to allow those agents to work with each other more effectively, both inside the enterprise, but also with third parties, right? And so you're seeing sort of the ability to actually leverage generative AI in a larger scale than other before, and leverage some of the components that other people have built within your own workflow process. So it's a very exciting time for firms to get more value from the technology much more quickly.
Yeah, it sounds like an exciting time and an exciting opportunity for insurers in particular. And that was a really nice detailed answer about what the technology is and how it's being used. You sort of answered my next question as well. But did you have anything else to add about what makes insurance as an industry especially suited for the adoption of agentic AI?
Yeah, insurance is still a very kind of process-driven industry that still has a lot of touch points of information that tends to be unstructured, right? A lot of documents, even on the claim side, a lot of images or sort of insurance policies that aren't necessarily the same from claimant to claimant or even sort of within the industry. And in the past, from using sort of AI to help accelerate those processes, we've really had to invest in, as an industry, into sort of building and training models that were very specific to specific use cases. So if I wanted to do something with like, automating sort of insurance claims on the auto side from images of like damaged cars, I had to train something that was very specific for that, right? The same things with medical forms. I'd have to train them very specific on individual form types. Now with generative AI, you're able to use the sort of the same core technology to work on a variety of use cases. So what it's done is dramatically accelerate the ability to deal with much greater parts of the value chain without having to invest as much from a technology and infrastructure perspective. And what that's allowed us to do is tackle a much broader set of use cases across the industry. And so certainly things like customer support, it's an area where we've seen a tremendous amount of benefits from an automation perspective, because not only are you being able to serve your customers more effectively by looking at their history of interactions with you, dynamically understanding their communications with you in real time, and then being able to suggest what they're trying to do, at the same time looking at very complex policy documents that are going to be different from customer to customer, and the regulations are different from area to area. Being able to take all of that together to serve a customer more effectively both increases the amount of automation, but probably more importantly, increases the customer satisfaction that goes along with that. We've seen the same thing on the claims processing side, first notice of the loss, any of those supply chains that we would have seen a little bit of AI automation in past years. Just that transformation is accelerating so much more quickly with the advent of generative AI technologies into the fore.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And that customer satisfaction piece of it is so important. And I know, as you mentioned, agentic AI is taking on more responsibility. And obviously with that comes, a balance with, as you mentioned, keeping the humans in the loop as well. So how are you at AWS sort of helping carriers balance that innovation piece of it with the need for, compliance, transparency, and consumer trust?
Yeah, that move to agentic AI has actually helped quite a bit from being able to create a more observable, kind of managed and safe process, if you will. The way we've approached it from an AWS perspective is that not only have we invested in responsible AI development from the core large language models themselves and worked with partners where we know have fundamentally kind of built safety and security into their models, we've also added something we call guardrails. Amazon Bedrock's our platform, and with it comes a product called Amazon Guardrails, which allows you to actually put filters in on sort of the input questions to your models as well as sort of the output. So making sure if you're having something that's looking at a fraud claim, in a medical insurance claim, that the topics that the questions go in are actually related to that as well as the ones that come out. Additionally, we use generative AI to check generative AI. And so in those agentic cases where you've got an agent that's focused in a specific area, it usually has a data set or a knowledge base that's really anchored in that area that kind of keeps the information accurate on topic. We can actually use generative AI to check the answers that come out of those models. So you have that sort of second level of security. And in those cases where we do that, we found at least if someone's using sort of a knowledge base as part of the process, you'll pick up sort of 75% of the hallucinations or inaccuracies along with that. And then additionally, what we've actually done is taken some investments we've made in the security space in the past, what we call automated reasoning, the ability to sort of actually look at a problem and break it down into sort of mathematical equations. And when you actually have like a policy that's formal, we can actually take that policy and use it as an additional check on top of the other two, both topic filtering as well as using generated check. And in those cases where you have a strongly and well-defined policy, we can solve sort of another 99% of sort of the hallucinations come out. So by giving our customers that ability to put the foundational guardrails around accuracy, we find we can create a much more accurate process, which I think is key to earning kind of trust from generative AI perspective. And then recently we've built out sort of an overall framework that allows us to do that at scale, but also give observability on how agents work together. So one of the challenges you can imagine, if you can break a task into smaller components and then have those agents work together to complete one, you want to understand actually what has been sort of the communication between them, how are they interacting with each other, and are they behaving in the way that you expect? And something called Agent Core is the way we actually kind of create that platform that allows insurance and other firms to be comfortable that not only do they have well-governed agents, that they have the way to inspect and observe how they're working together. And that combination of security and observability, we think are the things that firms need to actually build out the foundations to create things that both themselves and their regulators are comfortable with.
Yeah, this is so interesting to me because you're basically building an entire team of AI agents who are checking each other's work, but with all of the knowledge and the efficiency that comes with the technology as well. So it's a really interesting space in insurance. And I'm excited to see where it evolves. And I'm curious where you see agentic AI sort of having the biggest near-term impact in insurance. Is it underwriting, claims, customer service, or a combination of those things?
Yeah, certainly we've seen the immediate impact in customer service. You can look at examples across the industry where that ability to both automate, but also bring advice to the customers so much more effective. We've also seen that in the ability to onboard new employees, particularly from a servicing perspective, and make them just much more effective, much more quickly, right? Reductions of up to 30% of the time it takes to onboard new employees into that value chain. Secondly, on the claims processing side, first notice of loss, any of those really well-defined workloads when it comes to accelerating the ability to do sort of document processing through any of the insurance claim life cycles, very powerful, as well as sort of first notice of loss. And then we're also seeing it as well on the technology side as from an onboarding perspective. One of the kind of interesting cases on the reinsurance side, one of our customers, Athene, they work with other insurance companies to understand sort of what their portfolios are, to understand how to manage risk. One of the challenges they faced was that each of their customers had a different format and set of data, and their ability to actually figure out how can we take a new format of insurance portfolio we've never seen before, translate into our own capabilities, and then actually use that to see if we can price a reinsurance risk. They used an agentic approach. Essentially, that would take their existing knowledge, look at the new data, and actually create business requirements to figure out how they could actually map that data, like actually write the first set of code that would actually do that transformation. And they took a process which would take a customer a number of months to onboard and actually got them into just a couple of weeks, right? And so just accelerates the ability of customers to provide value within the whole insurance chain. And I think that's one of the nice things that where the industry's at. 2 years ago, I would have said you'd have to have a very experimental approach to figure out where you were going to find value from a generative AI perspective. But I think in those areas, there are enough confidence across the industry, enough peer examples that those are great areas for insurers to start.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is a fascinating conversation. I think we could talk for much longer about this, but we've covered a lot of ground just in, 15 minutes. So given everything that we've talked about, I'm curious what excites you the most about the next few years of the use of AI in insurance.
Yeah, it's amazing how fast the pace of change continues to evolve. It's hard to imagine that it hasn't really even been 3 years since generative AI has sort of hit the scene. And we've already seen the massive improvements year over year in what the technology is capable of and how broadly it's been able to impact the industry as a whole. So I'm always excited just to see sort of how the capabilities of the models will continue to improve. It's one of the areas we think that's been key to making our customers successful is to give them the flexibility to pick those models and frameworks, which are evolving more quickly without having them make that heavy investment to sort of keep up with all the technology that's going on. That move to agentic, I think, is also very exciting. Right now, we're beginning to see it internally, making workflows more efficient. What we haven't quite seen yet, but I think is coming, is that it's going to be easier for insurers and those firms that provide value to insurance firms to work together more effectively from a overall community perspective. Right now, if you want to integrate your core system from a policy administration perspective with third-party providers, you probably have to understand their APIs, do a bunch of data mapping, and invest quite heavily in doing that integration between systems. And when we think about 70 to 80% of the information that really drives the industry is still kind of caught in those core systems, a move to agentic interfaces where you can simply ask information in a human format and interact with those systems effectively in human, I think that's going to allow us to accelerate out the value we can bring from third-party providers into insurers, and accelerate how quickly we can get value from the generative AI revolution. So it's very exciting to see both how the technology changes, but also the way that people work and interact with it.
Yeah, that is another exciting piece of it, to see how it changes the way that human employees are working and interacting too. That could be a whole other podcast episode topic. But
I'm sorry, Elizabeth. And the funny thing is that all of this is actually just making human employees more effective, right? It's not so much replacing as much as expanding the capabilities to the areas where they're not doing sort of the undifferentiated work of looking up data, kind of going through source information. It's just making everyone in the industry more capable. And it's actually, I think, going to allow us to bring in sort of a new generation of employees into the industry that are just going to be much more effective and impactful when they start.
Yeah. And I think that's a great point, because that's something we hear over and over on this podcast is don't be scared of this technology. It's not taking jobs away. It's actually making jobs better and more efficient. So I think that's a great point. And, this has been a fascinating conversation. So thank you so much for taking the time to come on and speak with me.
Oh, this was my pleasure. Thank you for having us today.
Well, that's it for this episode. Thanks to John for joining me, and thanks to all of you who tuned in. Be sure to check back next month for another episode of the Insuring Cyber podcast. And in the meantime, you can check out all of our previous episodes on insurancejournal.tv or wherever you get your podcasts. Talk to you next time.